It doesn't matter if the paw was real or if it wasn't. My name's Sam, and this is my channel. Do 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 do. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam, and today we'll be talking about The Monkey's Paw and the Art of Coincidence. The Monkey's Paw is a horror short story written by W. Jacobs in 1902. This story is about an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. White, who live in the countryside with their son Herbert. On a dark and stormy night, the elderly couple invite over a friend named Sergeant Major Morris, and he introduces them to the Monkey's Paw. Now, the Monkey's Paw is supposed to be a highly valued occult object, granting 3 men 3 wishes each. And when Mr. White gets excited about this, Major Morris does tell him that these wishes have consequences, so much so that the last owner of the paw, on his 3rd wish, wished death upon himself. Mr. White laughs this off even when Major Morris says that he is the current owner of the paw and he has made wishes himself that he completely regrets. During their conversation, Morris throws the monkey's paw into an open fire in hopes that it'll be the last that anyone ever sees of it, sparing anybody else of its consequences. Mr. White snatches the paw out of the fire and pleads with Morris to let him keep it. And after some convincing, Morris decides to let him. Now, he doesn't do so without a warning. He tells Mr. White that fate rules with people's lives and those who try and avoid it suffer the consequences, and that if he is to use this paw, he is doing so at his own risk. And this is where the 3 wishes come into play. Now, they're all sitting around the fire after the sergeant has left, joking about the monkey's paw, and Herbert suggests that they wish for money. And so they do. They decide to wish for just enough money to make themselves comfortable. In that time, they wished for about £200. After Mr. White makes the wish on Herbert's behalf, they kind of lightly laugh it off and go to bed. The next day, Herbert goes to work and he doesn't return. Instead, Mr. and Mrs. White are visited by a man who works for the company that their son does. He comes with unfortunate news that their son has been caught in a machine and killed. And then he offers them £200 in condolences from the company. They bury their son, and after a few days, the wife realizes that she still has 2 wishes left on the monkey's paw, and she could possibly bring her son back to life. The husband is really against this idea, but he won't admit that something supernatural is going on. So he decides to make the wish for his wife. That's when things get a little scary outside and they start to hear noises and sounds, and the husband himself slowly convinces himself that his son is alive, clawing his way back to the house, and uses his 3rd wish to wish his son gone. Now, was this really supernatural? Was this fate? Or is it all just coincidence and the psychology of superstition? Let's go back to the beginning of the story. In one of the first paragraphs, W. Jacobs states, "Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical chances, putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire." In the beginning of the story, we see that Mr. White has an urge for unnecessary risk and gambling. And from the very beginning, he is tempting fate. He has an ego and pride about himself that says, "My son can't beat me. I'm too good at this." However, in the very next few sentences, his son catches a vital mistake that he made and checkmates him. Mr. White had an ego, and that rubbed off on his son. Major Morris specifically warned them of severe consequences from wishing on something on the monkey's paw, and Herbert is the one that convinced his parents to make that first wish. If Herbert dies and the money is coming from Herbert's death, is that a coincidence? Or was Herbert being so cocky that he forgot to pay attention at his job and thus got caught in the machinery? Was it fate, or was it lack of consciousness? Was it temptation, or was it just being an idiot? And so, Was Herbert's death the start of a domino effect because of the supernatural? Or did a buildup of coincidences lead Mr. and Mrs. White to start changing their beliefs? When the wife remembers the monkey paw a week after the son's death, the husband claims that it was just a coincidence. So the wife says, "What's the harm in me trying if it was just a coincidence?" But he's very apprehensive in letting his wife make the wish. Is this because of humans' tendencies to believe in the superstition? See, humans have the need to explain the unexplainable. So when the son's company wouldn't take responsibility for his death, the parents had to put it somewhere. So they started leaning on the idea that the monkey's paw was real, which explains the wife's urge to use it to bring back her son and the husband's apprehension. Maybe it was a coincidence, but what if it was real? What could be happening to their son? So does this lead them to hear and see things that aren't really there? If you go into a game with the expectation to fail, usually you fail. It's all about mindset. So when the wife hears knocking on her door, she assumes that it's the son come back to life, come back to see her, and she knows nothing of the consequences that could become of this. However, the husband, knowing that this could be real, fears what consequences could be brought from bringing his son back to life. Yes, he might be alive, but he's been dead for a week, so what will be of his body? And when the wife goes to unlock the door, the husband scurries for the paw. Mr. White doesn't want to believe that the paw has magic, but he's too superstitious not to use it. He makes a wish at the same time as his wife opens the door, and nothing's there, and the story ends. So if the monkey's paw were real, wouldn't have there been consequences to the other two wishes? There was no real consequence to the wife's wish for bringing the son back, unless you assume that that tapping outside the door was the dead son. However, the husband makes the third wish, and the story ends after that. We don't get to see a consequence to the third wish, and therefore we have to assume that the domino effect of wishes ends there. Therefore, if there was no actual consequence to the third wish, was this fate at all, or was this all in the heads of Mr. and Mrs. White because of a coincidental death of their son? So while the moral of this story is don't tempt fate, I think a more interesting concept is the fact that humans are more willing to believe in superstition over coincidence when our beliefs line up with it. It's much easier to believe that the monkey's paw was responsible for Herbert's death rather than their own forgetfulness and arrogance. The writer uses a lot of foreshadowing and hidden symbolism to really push the story forward, but we never get a clear answer of whether this was the monkey's paw or whether it was all made up. And that's kind of the point of the story. This author uses the art of coincidence to question everything that they believe in. And that's what's most interesting about the monkey's paw. It takes the art of coincidence to showcase human psychology and why we believe in fate. It doesn't matter if the paw was real or if it wasn't. It's more important to know why the Whites believed in what they did and what they did about it. Let me know what you think of the idea of fate versus superstition, and comment down below what your favorite version of the three-wish story is. Otherwise, that's all I have for you today. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you next week with more shenanigans.